All right, everyone, we are sitting here with Darcy today, and we're going to talk about her volunteer experience in Ukraine and what prompted her to come here and help out and everything she's done. But first, I want to turn it over to you, Darcy, and if you kind of share a little bit about who you are, your background, and where you've come from prior to this moment.
Sure. Thank you, Shannon, first for the opportunity. I am a 53-year-old woman from Lakewood, Washington State, America. I was living your regular, everyday life before I found out about the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I was working as a cook in an American chain restaurant and going to yoga and living a pretty smooth life that benefited no one but myself. And I was beginning to get a little restless and wondering what life was all about. And when I found out about the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, somehow I knew that I would be here supporting Ukrainians. And I live here now. I've lived in Lviv since October of 2023.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Very cool. And what was there a defining story or moment that you recall prior to coming to Ukraine that flipped a light switch, if it will, that made you say, I've got to go for that reason?
I remember it like it was yesterday when after February 24th, 2022, I started seeing ads on my social media feed from international organizations. Please help the Ukrainian refugee crisis. And I knew something was going on, but I couldn't extract myself from my self-absorbed life at the moment. And when I said, I wonder what's going on in Ukraine, and I actually had to Google it, I was so ignorant. What stood out, and this might sound like some kind of a fangirl, but this is the truth. I was mesmerized by the bravery and the resistance of the Ukrainian people. And I watched story after story of news, how regular, everyday Ukrainians stepped up and was willing to defend their country. I watched this newscast of men who made kitchen pots and pans, and all of a sudden they were making hedgehogs. I saw women and children who obviously didn't want to leave their husband and their father, but more so they wanted to contribute to the defense of their country. And they were making what I know now is camouflage nets. I didn't recognize that at the time.
Okay.
So how it sounds, I'm like, I have to help. I have to go to Ukraine. I have to help Ukrainians in Ukraine. I have to stand with them. I have to connect with them. I have to do this. I have to understand them better. And that's what drove me to start studying the language. And once I figured out what kind of skill I could bring, which is cooking or prepping vegetables, it took me a year later to figure all that out. But when I did, I went.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for coming over to volunteer. What were your initial impressions on arriving in Ukraine? And first of all, am I correct in assuming Lviv was the first place you came to?
It is.
Okay.
Lviv is the first place. I'm not brave. I Googled.
You're here in Ukraine volunteering in a war conflict, so don't sell yourself short.
I Googled Lviv volunteer in kitchen,
Okay.
and I found Lviv volunteer kitchen. But yes, so what I found, Lviv is vibrant and beautiful, and like the food is amazing. The first day I was here, there was an air raid alarm, and I was like, what do I do? And I was hungry. I had like no food, and I looked out the window, and Ukrainians were just going about their day like it wasn't even happening. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do what they're doing. I'm going to the store. I didn't know at the time that all the stores shut down, but
Right.
That's beside the point. But I really enjoy getting to know the Ukrainian people, and I like how they are pretty composed in public.
Okay.
I really like that.
Okay. What were your expectations or perceptions about Ukraine, and maybe even specifically coming to Lviv to volunteer before you arrived, and has that evolved or changed now that you're here and living here?
I didn't have any expectations when I first got here for my visit in March of 2023.
Okay.
The only thing that I did hear time and time again is that Ukraine is not an English-friendly country, which I can't disagree more. There's a lot of people who speak a little English, or quite a bit of English, especially the young population. So I was set up to struggle my way through things, and that can't be further from the truth. Of course, there are awkward, uncomfortable moments where I can't communicate what I want to communicate, but there's lots of Ukrainians around who can speak English. And so I don't know, I want to dispel that myth in case anyone out there has heard the same thing.
Okay. Now you mentioned the volunteer kitchen, you mentioned camo netting. So tell me a little bit about the places you have volunteered at in the city and how you came to find these spots and get involved.
I found the Vive Volunteer Kitchen online on Twitter, and I spent about 5 weeks there at the beginning, and just walking in, being humble, and just doing whatever needed to be done, peeling vegetables and the like. When I returned back to the United States, I was kind of depressed, and I really wanted to continue to do more for the Ukrainians in Ukraine. So I started volunteering to teach English through an organization called Engine, and through there, I online lessons. I have a student. She lives in Kyiv, and so that's a nice way to continue, or another way of volunteering. And I actually met her. It was a really special moment in my life. We actually met when I went to Kyiv this past January, and I volunteered at another kitchen called Murashke in Kyiv. I was there for 2 weeks. And it's apples and oranges. You know, it's a different kitchen, different way of doing things, but still making food for the army. Still the same purpose, the same goal. And then I made some trench candles during the winter, but with the weather being what it is, you know, that's not happening right now.
Right. Okay. To kind of go back to another question of when you first came to Lviv, what kind of challenges have you faced during your time here, and how have you overcome them, whether that's personal, I know you kind of discussed the language expectations, or challenges connecting, whatever that looks like. How have you overcome those?
I don't think there's really challenges. I think there's just the everyday things to expect when you go to a foreign country. You don't know where things are, again, the language, etc. But I don't think they're challenges. It's just part of the travel experience. In all honesty, I think the hardest part was my habit to be so independent. And I had a hard time asking for help. And, in America, as strong and independent as can be, here in another country, especially Ukraine at this time, I needed to ask for help, and that was difficult, and I made it difficult. So once I got out of my own way, there were plenty of people willing to assist me, and I just needed to let that happen.
I like that you talk about getting out of your own way, because I personally had the same experience a little bit in that I have a hard time asking for help, being independent, and then also maybe it's a little bit of the American mentality. I have this fear of looking stupid in any environment. So if I fumble the language in asking for help, then I feel even double jeopardized personally. So I had to do that, get out of my own way and ask for help. Kind of on a related note, how do you maintain your mental health while volunteering in a war zone? So you've come to a whole new culture, language, country, war zone, changed your whole life essentially to come over and help Ukraine. How do you stay grounded yourself?
I think there's four things: yoga, gratitude, perspective, and friends. So yoga, I can go on and on about yoga, but it does amazing things for the mind, the body, and the nervous system. And I've been practicing yoga for years, and so I make sure I do that. And it really is true about having gratitude for the smallest things. After I sit on my yoga mat in the hallway during an attack, and I'm hearing explosions around me, and I'm really grateful for that hot cup of coffee and that hot meal. Like, I don't need much more. It doesn't, the things that I worry about on a daily basis, they really don't matter. When you're sitting in your hallway at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. Perspective. For whatever mild inconveniences I feel I'm going through, I always think about the soldiers on the front. And I'm sure they would love to be home with their children and their families and doing something else. So whatever I'm doing, I can handle that for an indefinite period of time. And our community, our foreign community that we have of foreigners, and hanging out with Ukrainians as well, just the volunteer community, and just taking time, obviously, to just unwind and relax. And even me, as a severe introvert, knows that I need to work on friendships, and they're extremely rewarding, especially here.
Mm-hmm. I want to dig in a little bit deeper on something you mentioned earlier. You said when you returned to the States, you were depressed. You ended up coming back here. And I'm asking this from the context of this morning, actually, I was reading a story about a particular, an American, well, she's Haitian born, but a U.S. citizen. She moved to Europe in hopes of finding a new life, starting abroad. She's a project manager, has a remote job. But the key point of the story was she lived in Europe for several years, well, maybe 2 to 3 years, tried to make it work and was depressed moving to Europe and missed her connections and ways she thrived in the U.S. and ended up moving back to the U.S. and was featured in an article on that. And here you share kind of a reverse perspective. And I realize environments are different for people and everything like that. But what is it? Why do you think you moved back to the U.S. of where, you came from for so many years prior to Ukraine and were depressed making that move and came back here and now you found meaning, purpose, and all that? Can you tell a little bit more about that?
It's hard to explain. I have thought about it some because I wonder how I got here too. But for a lot of my adult life, it was defined by two things, travel and wanting to help others. My first job was a social worker until I burnt out. And I really wanted to make the world a better place. And after, I got married, I got divorced, and I have no kids by choice. Career just doesn't do anything for me. Climbing that ladder, recognition doesn't do anything for me. And when I realized that I really wanted to do something to support Ukraine and I had no idea what to do at the time, I realized that what I choose to live for is principles. A life that I personally am proud of. And for me right now, that looks like supporting Ukraine, standing with Ukrainians, everyday Ukrainians. So I guess that's the best way I can describe it now.
Okay.
Maybe it's my age too. When you think, you've done this, that, and the next thing, what really is there in life? Mm-hmm. And I believe that big part of life is to be of service. Mm-hmm. And I don't regret being here at all. I'm very proud to be here.
Thank you for that. How do you stay informed about the broader geopolitical context of the conflict? What are your sources for what's going on? And I mentioned political, but also maybe even on a non-political scene about Ukraine from sources outside of Ukraine. Do you have something like that for yourself?
I do. There's a couple. Well, okay. The Guardian. I like The Guardian. I like the Kyiv Independent, which I know is in Ukraine. Right. There's also a couple of YouTubers that I follow.
Okay.
One is in Ukraine, actually. His name is Operator Starsky. He is a press officer in the Ukrainian army, and he puts out 7-minute updates on what's happening. And there's also another YouTuber by the name of Artur Rehi. He is an Estonian. He's a man from Estonia who served his time as a conscripted soldier, and he keeps me informed as well. Mm-hmm. And there's other sources here and there within Ukraine, but those I'm going to say are the main sources of my information.
Mm-hmm. Have there been any memorable moments during your time here so far? One particular story you care to share?
Oh yeah. I'm not going to focus on the attacks and the alarms and etc. because there's more to being here. Meeting my English students. I mean, who would have guessed? Who would have guessed when we had our first Zoom meeting, that we would meet in downtown Kyiv and start this friendship. Not just a student-teacher relationship. When I was in Kyiv, I was having dinner with a friend, and we were minding our own business, enjoying a meal, having a great conversation, and an air raid alarm went off, and we all had to leave. And in that small, very inconsequential moment of what are we doing? All we're doing, I can't finish my meal, I can't finish this conversation. Like it really brings home how disruptive this is to everyone. Imagine like leaving your home, leaving your school, your friends, your pets, your father, your husband. I'm just leaving a meal and dinner. Just leaving a meal and conversation, and this is like disruptive. I think really just getting to know everybody here. I can't put into words, but it's extremely valuable, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life.
Okay. I'll wrap up, and I have one more question before we wrap up. And I want to ask, you mentioned at the very beginning that you talking about meaning and finding that, and that was part of also a big part of the reason for coming to Ukraine and volunteering. So I would assume that like who you are as a person now versus 20 years ago, is all different. So what do you love most about yourself and who you are now with this new renewed sense of meaning and what you're doing in Ukraine?
I really made it a point to sit down and ask myself, especially in those dark years, everybody has those dark moments in their life, what really makes me happy? And what really matters to me, and not compare that to anybody else, and not look to social media or societal expectations to define who I am. And I find great freedom and great peace of mind when I can sit here and look you in the eye and say, I know who I am, and I know why I'm here, and no one back home or no one back in America might understand, and that doesn't matter because I know why I'm here. And I am living a life that I am proud of without any thanks. I'm not doing it for my own good. I'm doing it to be of service to others. And it took some time to be comfortable like that, but it was worth the wait.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very, very awesome. What else? What message would you like to share to those people wanting to volunteer and do more than give money online? And they need that little extra oomph and push to get off the couch, get on the plane, and come over and help. What would you say to them?
That you don't need to be a world traveler. You don't need to have a whole resume full of skills. You just need to have the heart for Ukraine and an open mind and willing to learn and be able to peel vegetables. And do it while you can. Do it while you have the time, your health, the money. It's going to be uncomfortable, yeah. And that moment passes. It's going to be awkward if you can't order your food. And someone will help you, and that moment will pass. And in return, you're going to do something to help a country. And that's all I got. That's
awesome. That's awesome. So thank you again, Darcy, to everyone listening here. To recap that in there, I really love it. Just come and be humble, and you don't need to be a world traveler. You can cut vegetables and potatoes and onions, and the awkward moments will pass. So don't hesitate to come over and connect and find areas you can help and volunteer at. Thank you, Darcy.
Thank you.